I saw my daughter-in-law hurl a suitcase into the lake with trembling hands. At first, I thought it was anger, another tantrum after one of their fights. But then I heard it. A faint, muffled cry coming from inside that sinking suitcase. That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. My name is Laura Whitman. I'm 63 years old and I live alone by Miller's Lake in Oregon. Before I start, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I love knowing how far these stories travel, how many hearts they reach. Now let me tell you how my peaceful world shattered one gray afternoon, and how a single cry from the water changed everything. It was early spring, the kind of afternoon when the wind smells like wet pine and rain-soaked earth. The clouds had gathered low, a heavy quilt over the hills. I'd just finished watering my azaleas when I saw a car pull up at the far edge of the lake. Daniel's silver SUV. My son hadn't visited in weeks, but I could tell right away it wasn't him who stepped out. It was Amber, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a long beige coat, her blonde hair yanked back in a messy bun. She looked frantic, glancing around like someone running from her own shadow. Then I saw it. The dark blue suitcase she dragged from the trunk. It looked heavy. She struggled with it, wheeling it across the damp grass toward the water's edge. For a moment, I stood frozen behind my porch railing, hidden by the vines. I should have called out, but something in her movements made me go still. She didn't toss it carelessly. She shoved it with both hands, a hard, deliberate motion that made the suitcase splash deep, then disappear beneath the ripples. Amber stood there for a second, breathing hard. Then she covered her face and whispered something I couldn't hear. And then she left, just like that. Her car engine faded down the dirt road. The lake was silent again, but my stomach, it wasn't. Something in me twisted. The kind of instinct that doesn't ask questions. It just screams go. I grabbed my flashlight and ran down the hill, my shoes sinking into the wet earth. The water was murky, the color of old tea, swallowing the last ring of ripples. Then I heard it. Soft, faint, unmistakable. A cry. Not a bird, not the wind. A baby. My whole body went cold. "Dear God," I whispered. No, it can't be." I kicked off my shoes and waded in. The water bit at my skin, icy enough to burn. My hands dove under, sweeping blindly until my fingers brushed metal. The suitcase handle. It was heavy, slippery. I heaved it up with everything I had, dragging it toward the shore, coughing from the cold. When I finally pulled it onto the grass, the sound stopped. "Please, please," I gasped, fumbling with the zipper. My fingers wouldn't work. They were too numb. I tore at it with my nails until it came loose. Inside, a small soaked bundle, wrapped in a thin pink blanket. The baby's skin was pale blue, lips trembling, tiny fists clenched. For a second, I thought she was gone. But then she whimpered again, so faintly it sounded like a sigh. I wrapped her in my sweater and pressed her to my chest. She was so cold, too cold. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered. "Hold on, just hold on." I stumbled back toward my porch, heart hammering, legs trembling from the freezing water. My phone slipped twice before I managed to call 911. "Yes, I found a baby," I stammered. "In the lake. Please hurry." But then I stopped. They'd ask questions. They'd take her away. They'd call Daniel, and Daniel would tell Amber. And Amber, she'd find a way to twist it all. She always did. I looked down at the baby, at her tiny chest fluttering like a trapped bird's. She needed warmth, not interrogation. So I hung up. I lit the fireplace instead, found a soft towel and cradled her close. The scent of lake water and innocence filled my hands. As I held her there, I couldn't stop trembling, not just from the cold, but from the realization that the woman who'd thrown her into the lake was family. I whispered it out loud to no one. How could she? Outside, the lake rippled quietly, pretending nothing had happened. But inside my chest, a storm had begun. And that night, as the baby's faint cries faded into the crackle of the fire, I made a silent promise. Whatever this is, whatever darkness Amber's hiding, I will uncover it, even if it breaks my heart to do it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that suitcase sinking, the ripples swallowing a secret someone wanted forgotten. The baby slept fitfully beside the fireplace, her tiny breaths uneven but stubborn. I watched her chest rise and fall, whispering silent prayers into the dark. By morning, the world outside looked normal again. The mist had lifted from the lake, sunlight spilled through the pines. But nothing felt normal anymore. Not after what I'd seen Amber do. I wrapped the baby in a fresh blanket, fed her what I could, warm milk from a dropper, and sat down with shaking hands. What was I supposed to do? Call the police? Tell Daniel? Pretend I hadn't seen anything? Every answer felt wrong. And yet, doing nothing felt worse. You need to understand something about my family before I tell you what came next. My son Daniel was always the kind one, steady, thoughtful. He grew up without his father after the accident, and maybe that made me hold on a little too tightly. I worked double shifts as a nurse just to make sure he could go to college. When he met Amber, I wanted to believe she was good for him, smart, funny, full of life. But sometimes the most beautiful people cast the darkest shadows. From the start, she made it clear that my presence in their lives was tolerated, not welcomed. When I'd drop by, she'd greet me with that plastic smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Oh, you didn't have to come all the way out here, Laura," she'd say, voice dripping with sugar and steel. I'd pretend not to notice the way she rearranged Daniel's schedule, keeping him too busy to visit me. Then, after Daniel lost his job last year, things got worse. Amber started making comments, subtle at first, cruel later. "Maybe if you hadn't spoiled him so much, he'd know how to handle pressure," she told me once, her tone light but her eyes sharp. I brushed it off. Families fight, couples struggle. But behind her perfect smile, something rotten was spreading. When Amber got pregnant, Daniel was overjoyed. I remember him showing me the ultrasound picture like it was a miracle. "Mom, I'm going to be a dad," he said, tears in his eyes. Amber, on the other hand, looked terrified. She avoided baby talk, skipped doctor visits, and when I asked to host a baby shower, she said coldly, "Let's not make it a big deal. These things can go wrong." It chilled me then. Now I understood why. 3 weeks ago, Daniel called crying. Amber had told him the baby didn't make it. A stillbirth, she'd said. Complications. The hospital kept her overnight, then sent her home. I remember sitting in my kitchen, clutching the phone, whispering, "Oh no, my grandbaby." I even sent flowers. She never thanked me. And now, here she was, throwing a suitcase into my lake, with a baby inside, the same baby she said had died. I looked at the infant again, small, pink now from warmth, tiny fingers curling around mine, alive, beautiful, innocent. My voice trembled as I whispered, "You're her baby, aren't you?" The baby stirred, eyelids fluttering. A soft sigh escaped her lips. It felt like an answer. When the phone rang that afternoon, my heart nearly stopped. "Daniel." "Mom?" His voice cracked. "Have you seen Amber?" I swallowed hard. "Not since last week. Why?" She's not herself," he said. "She's been acting strange since we came home from the hospital. Yesterday she drove off without saying where she was going. I'm worried, Mom." I stared at the baby, at her perfect little face. Strange. That was one word for it. "I'm sure she'll come back soon," I said carefully. "You just rest, sweetheart. Try not to panic." He sighed. "I don't know what's happening anymore. She barely talks to me. Keeps saying we have to move away, start over, but she won't say why." Something in his voice broke me. My sweet boy, so trusting, so blind to the woman beside him. After we hung up, I sat for a long time in silence. The clock ticked, the baby breathed softly, and the lake outside shimmered like glass, calm, deceitful. Amber's lies ran deeper than I'd imagined. If she could fake her own child's death, what else had she done? I held the baby close and whispered, "Don't you worry, little one. I won't let her near you again, not until the truth comes out." The baby shifted against my chest, and for the first time I thought I saw a tiny smile. Outside, a car passed down the distant road, a flash of silver through the trees, Daniel's car, Amber's world, and mine, about to collide again in ways I couldn't yet imagine, because soon the lie she buried in that lake would begin to surface. For 2 days I lived in silence, the kind that hums in your bones, where every creak of the floor feels like a question you can't answer. The baby, her baby, slept in my guest room, wrapped in soft towels and love I didn't know I still had to give. I named her Hope in my heart because that's what she'd become, proof that even in the coldest water, something innocent could survive. But peace never lasts long when truth is fighting to breathe. On the morning of the second day, I turned on the radio while fixing a bottle. The voice of the announcer cracked through the quiet. Local authorities are investigating a missing newborn reported from Westlake Hospital. The infant, born 3 days ago to a woman named Amber Whitman, has yet to be located. Officials suspect possible foul play. My knees buckled. The bottle slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor. Amber Whitman, my daughter-in-law. My blood ran cold. She'd told Daniel the baby died, but here she was, alive, in my arms. I knew what I had to do. I packed Hope into a soft blanket, tucked her into a small basket, and drove. The road to Daniel's house wound through pine and fog, and with every turn my pulse beat louder in my ears. When I pulled up in their driveway, Amber's car was there. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I knocked once. No answer. Then twice, harder. Finally, the door opened. Amber stood there, hair disheveled, eyes swollen, wearing the same beige coat she'd worn by the lake. For a second, she just stared at me, her face draining of color. "Laura," she whispered, "what are you—" I stepped forward and uncovered the baby's face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "She's alive," I said quietly. I pulled her from the lake. Amber's hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled instantly, not from guilt, but from fear. How did you— "Don't." My voice cut through her panic. "Don't pretend. I saw you. I heard her crying before you walked away." She staggered back, gripping the wall. For a moment, she looked almost human, broken, terrified. Then something darker crossed her face. "Laura, you can't tell Daniel." That sentence stopped me cold. "Can't tell him? He's her father." Amber shook her head violently, pacing the floor like a trapped animal. "No, he's not. You don't understand. You don't know what this will do." My world tilted. "What did you just say?" Her eyes met mine, wide, frantic, glistening. "It's not Daniel's baby," she whispered. "I made a mistake. I couldn't let him find out. He'd leave me, his family, his money. Everything would be gone." I just stared at her, my breath gone. The silence between us felt suffocating. "Amber, you tried to kill an innocent child because of your pride?" She covered her ears. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted her?" The way she said her made my stomach twist. "You threw away a life to protect your lie," I said quietly, "and now I hold the truth." Her face hardened. "You don't understand what I've been through. You've hated me since the day I married Daniel. You've been waiting for me to fall." "That's not true," I whispered. "But you did this to yourself." The baby stirred in the blanket, soft whimpering breaking the silence. Amber turned toward her, her lips trembling, a flicker of something human, almost maternal, then gone. "Please," she said, voice shaking, "just give her to me. We can fix this. We can make it go away." My grip tightened. "You had your chance, Amber. You buried it in the lake." Her expression changed, cold, sharp, venomous. "If you tell anyone, Laura," she hissed, "you'll destroy Daniel. He won't survive this. He's fragile. You know that." I felt my heart split between fury and sorrow, because she was right. Daniel was fragile, but he deserved truth, not poison wrapped in pity. "I'll protect him," I said, "but not your secret." Then I turned and walked out, her voice echoing behind me, a mix of begging and rage. When I reached my car, the baby whimpered again, tiny and alive against the thunder of my heart. I whispered, "You'll never go back in that water, little one, not while I'm breathing." As I drove away, I glanced in the mirror. Amber stood in the doorway, her face pale and hollow, eyes burning with something I'd never seen before. The look of a woman whose lies were starting to crumble. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, because the truth never stays buried for long. I barely slept that night. The house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were listening. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like her voice. By morning, I'd made my decision. Daniel deserved the truth, even if it shattered him. I packed Hope's tiny clothes, tucked the hospital blanket beside her, and drove to my son's house. The sky was gray, like the world itself was holding its breath. When I pulled up, Daniel was in the yard trying to fix the mailbox Amber had backed into last week. He looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from carrying a weight he didn't understand. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "Did you hear from Amber? She's been gone since yesterday. I'm starting to get scared." I took a deep breath. "Sweetheart, we need to talk." He frowned. "What's wrong?" I opened the car door and lifted the blanket gently. The baby stirred, letting out a tiny sigh. Daniel froze. His eyes widened, confusion flooding his face. "Mom, what? Who is that?" "Your daughter," I whispered. "Your baby, Daniel. She's alive." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What are you talking about?" "Amber said," she said. "I know what she said," I cut in, my voice trembling. "But she lied. I saw her, Daniel. I saw her throw a suitcase into the lake. This baby was inside." For a moment, he just stood there, silent. The color drained from his face. Then he laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. No, Mom, that's crazy. You must have been mistaken. Amber would never—" "She would," I said quietly. And she did. He shook his head, stepping back. "You've never liked her. You've been waiting for something like this, haven't you?" The words hit me like a slap. "Daniel, listen to yourself. You think I'd make up something like this? You think I'd drag a baby out of a freezing lake just to hurt your wife?" He rubbed his temples, breathing hard. "I don't know what to think right now." Before I could say another word, the sound of tires on gravel filled the air. Amber's car. She stepped out, face pale, eyes red from fake tears. She looked smaller, weaker, rehearsed. When she saw the baby in my arms, she gasped and ran forward. "Oh my God! Laura, what have you done?" Daniel turned to her, confused. "Amber, she says the baby's alive. That you—" Amber's eyes filled instantly. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "She's not our baby, Daniel. She's confused. You know how she's been since your dad passed." I froze. "What did you just say?" Amber turned to me, voice shaking perfectly, every word polished with innocence. "You need help, Laura. You've been seeing things, imagining things. The baby died in the hospital. I have the paperwork." Daniel looked between us, torn, lost, desperate to believe the easiest version of reality. "Amber," he whispered. "Mom says she saw—" Amber threw her arms around him, sobbing. "Please don't let her do this to us. Please, Daniel, I can't lose you too." He held her, his face twisted with pain. And just like that, the ground I stood on disappeared. The police arrived later that day after I made the mistake of calling them. Amber cried on the porch, clutching Daniel's hand while I stood inside, clutching the baby. They took my statement, their expressions unreadable. Then they questioned Amber. She told them I was grieving, delusional, obsessed with her, that I'd taken someone else's baby to fill a void. And somehow the officers didn't arrest her. They just left, promising to follow up. When they drove off, Amber turned to me with a smile so small and venomous it could have poisoned the air. "You really should rest, Laura," she said sweetly. This obsession isn't good for you." Daniel didn't look at me, not once. He just took her hand and led her inside, leaving me standing on the porch, shaking. That night, I sat in my living room staring into the flames. The baby, my granddaughter, slept beside me. The world thought I was crazy. Amber had turned everyone against me. But she didn't know me, not really. I'd spent my life saving people on the edge of death. I knew how to read wounds, and hers were all self-inflicted. She thought she'd won. But as I stared at the lake outside, the moonlight dancing on its surface, I whispered to the darkness, "You can drown the truth for a while, Amber, but it always finds its way back up." For 3 days, I barely left the house. I kept the curtains drawn, my phone off, the baby close. Every knock at the door made my pulse quicken. Every shadow outside looked like her, Amber. She thought she'd silenced me. She thought she'd buried me under doubt and whispers. But what she didn't know was that I'd spent 35 years as a nurse. And nurses, we see things people try to hide. We know the difference between a story that makes sense and one that doesn't. I started at the source, Westlake Hospital, the place where Amber had supposedly given birth and where her stillbirth was recorded. The hospital administrator still remembered me, Sharon Lee, a woman with tired eyes and the kind of empathy that comes from decades in the ER. When she saw me walk in, she smiled faintly. "Laura Whitman, haven't seen you in ages. Retired life treating you well?" I managed a tight smile. "I'm doing all right, Sharon. I just needed to check something for family reasons." Quietly. She hesitated. "Family?" "Yes. My daughter-in-law, Amber Whitman. She gave birth here about a week ago. I just wanted to confirm a few details." Her brow furrowed slightly, the way people's faces do when they know something they shouldn't say out loud. "I'll see what I can find." 10 minutes later, she returned with a file folder and a strange look. "The record says stillbirth, but there's something odd here." She flipped to the discharge sheet. The section that listed cause of death was blank. The physician's signature looked smudged, like it had been photocopied, not written. "Who signed this?" I asked. "Dr. Fisher," she said, "but that's not his handwriting. I'd stake my pension on it." My throat went dry. "Sharon," I whispered, "can I take a copy?" She shook her head. "You didn't get this from me, Laura, but if you're digging into something serious, you might want to talk to someone in records. The digital system logs who made edits." "Edits?" She nodded slowly. "This file was modified the morning after it was created." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the folder open before me. The paper smelled faintly of toner and dust, the scent of hidden truths. The birth time and the death time were only 32 minutes apart. The baby's name section was left blank, and yet the weight listed was identical to Hope's when I'd taken her to the clinic 2 days earlier for a checkup under a different name. It was her. No doubt left. Amber had bribed or coerced someone to falsify the death. I opened my old nursing phone book, the one I hadn't touched in years, and found a number I'd almost forgotten, Dr. Fisher's. When he answered, his voice sounded older, weaker, but kind as ever. "Dr. Fisher, it's Laura Whitman," I said softly. "You signed a stillbirth form for Amber Whitman. Did you see the baby yourself?" A pause, then, "No. I was told it was handled before my shift began. They just needed my signature to close the chart." My stomach turned. "By who?" "I don't remember, but I think it was a temp clerk. Name started with an M, maybe Melanie? That was enough. Someone inside had covered it up." I didn't sleep. Instead, I printed everything, organized it neatly into an envelope, and wrote a note addressed to Daniel. "If something happens to me, the truth is inside. Don't trust her until you read it." I slid it under the loose floorboard beneath my dresser, the same place I'd once hidden his birthday gifts when he was a boy, because now I wasn't just his mother. I was his witness. The next morning, I went out to clear my head. The lake was still, eerily calm, the same surface that had once almost swallowed Hope whole. When I came back, I found something sitting on my porch, a single pink baby sock, wet, no note, no sound, just the soft drip of water from the fabric, pooling on the wood. I froze. Someone had been here, and whoever left it wanted me to know. They were watching. I picked up the sock with trembling fingers, whispering to myself, "You should have chosen silence over sin, Amber. Now I'm coming for the truth." The wind carried the words across the lake like a promise. When you hide the truth beneath water, it doesn't disappear. It waits, heavy, patient, until someone dares to look deep enough. And that's exactly what I did. 2 days after finding the wet baby sock on my porch, I made my move. I went to the police station again, not as a grieving mother, not as a confused woman, but as a nurse with evidence. I placed the envelope on Detective Marla Jennings' desk. Inside were the falsified hospital records, my written statement, and the recording of Dr. Fisher's call. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she said, "Mrs. Whitman, if this is true, it's not just deception, it's attempted homicide." Her words made my heart tremble, but also, for the first time, "Breathe. Please," I whispered. "Just check the lake. The suitcase is still there. You'll find everything you need." The next morning, they came. Patrol cars lined the road to my property. Officers and waiters trudged into the gray water, their reflections rippling under the pale sky. I stood on my porch, clutching hope, watching as they searched. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then one of them shouted. They'd found it. The dark blue suitcase lodged beneath the reeds, half buried in mud. They hauled it out carefully, opening it on the shore. Inside were traces of the pink blanket I'd described, the same fabric I'd pulled from the water days ago. A hush fell over the team. Forensic photographers moved quietly. The detective looked up at me, her face pale but certain. "This will be enough," she said. That afternoon, they went to Daniel's house. I followed at a distance, parking across the street. My stomach was in knots. Part of me wanted justice. The other part, the mother in me, wanted to protect my son from the storm that was about to break his world. The door opened. Amber appeared in a neat sweater and soft makeup, playing the perfect suburban wife. But when she saw the uniforms behind the detective, her face went white. "Amber Whitman," Marla said firmly, "we have a warrant to search your property." Daniel came outside moments later, confusion painted across his face. "What's going on?" "Ask your wife," I said quietly, stepping forward. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. "Mom, not this again." "Daniel," I said, voice trembling, "they found the suitcase. They have proof." Amber turned to him, panicked. "She's lying. She's obsessed with me. She—" "Stop!" the detective snapped. "The baby's DNA matches your medical records, Mrs. Whitman. The hospital file was altered. It's over." Amber's lips parted, but no words came. Then something inside her broke. She started laughing, a sound sharp and wild echoing across the driveway. Her perfect composure cracked like glass. "You don't understand," she shouted. "You all think I'm a monster. But she ruined me. I gave him everything, and he still loved her more." Her voice trembled with fury and despair. "I couldn't let that child remind me of what I'd lost." Daniel's face crumpled. "Amber, what did you do?" She looked at him, eyes full of something between love and madness. "I just wanted us to start over," she whispered. Then she turned and ran, straight toward the lake. I dropped Hope into an officer's arms and sprinted after her. The wind tore through my hair, the water ahead flashing silver under the sun. "Amber, stop!" I screamed. "Don't do this!" She didn't. Turn. She reached the shore, stumbled, and fell to her knees in the mud, the same spot where I'd found the suitcase. When I reached her, she was sobbing, not from guilt, but exhaustion. "It was supposed to be simple," she murmured. "No one was supposed to know." I knelt beside her. "You tried to kill your own child, Amber, and yet she lived. You can't hide from that." She looked at me with hollow eyes. "You'll take her from me," she said softly. "No," I said. You already did that yourself." The police closed in. Amber didn't resist when they took her handcuffed from the mud. She looked small, a shadow of the woman who'd once ruled every room with her charm. As they led her away, Daniel collapsed beside the lake, covering his face with trembling hands. I stood there silently, the cold wind brushing my skin, Hope's faint cry carrying through the air. It was the same sound I'd heard that night. Only this time, it wasn't fear. It was life. I whispered to her across the distance, "You'll never go back in that lake. Not ever." And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift. 3 months have passed since that day by the lake. Sometimes, when the night is quiet, I still hear that faint cry, the one that led me into the water. But now it doesn't haunt me. It reminds me why I'm still here. Amber is in prison. The trial didn't take long once the truth came out. The forged hospital records, the altered signatures, the DNA results. When the judge read the sentence, she didn't cry. She didn't even look at me or Daniel. For someone who built her life on pretending, silence was her last performance. Daniel, my son, he's healing slowly. For weeks, he barely spoke. He blamed himself for not seeing the woman she truly was. One night, he came to me and whispered, "You saved her life, Mom, and you saved mine too." I told him the truth, that love makes us blind, and sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who teach us what strength really means. The baby, Hope, as I still call her, lives with me now. The court granted temporary custody, and Daniel visits every day. When he holds her, I see both heartbreak and redemption in his eyes. He hums lullabies he barely remembers from childhood, off-key but full of love. Hope has a tiny birthmark on her hand, shaped like a heart. Daniel says she got it from me, stubborn and unbreakable. I like to believe he's right. Every evening, I take her down to the lake. The same water that almost claimed her now reflects the sunset like nothing bad ever happened. I tell her stories she'll never remember, about courage, about truth, about how sometimes the smallest voice can save an entire world. I've forgiven Amber, not for her sake, but for mine. Hate would only poison what we fought to save. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the weight that keeps you from living again. So, if you're listening now, wherever you are, remember this. Sometimes it takes the quietest cry to awaken the loudest strength. And if life ever tries to drown your light, don't let it. Because even in the darkest water, truth will always float.